Welcome back to another episode of Living with FASD, Candid Conversations with Patti Kasper. I'm your host, and joining me again is our good friend, Dr. Jerrod Brown. Jerrod, good to have you back. What
Thank
is
you for
on the
having
menu for today's conversation?
neuroplasticity. Gives
Okay.
me a lot of hope about working with folks who have brain-based impairments.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's a topic that comes up frequently in the literature, not so much in the FASD world, but it is in there. If you go through the research, you'll find the topic of neuroplasticity that comes up from time to time. Clearly an area worth further exploration. We have any researchers listening here, doctoral students, definitely a great area to dig into, especially from that intervention lens.
So I have a couple thoughts flitting through my mind as we talk about this. One is, where do we have that balance of the myth that people outgrow FASD, um, which is patently false because no one magically, gets over an injury to the brain. However, we do adapt, especially if we have supports in place. We are, of course, always capable of learning and growing with just at a slower pace. So, how does neuroplasticity fit into all this?
At a very, very basic level, when you think of neuroplasticity, that's kind of our brain's ability to change and adapt as a result of different experiences. It could be your social experience, it could be what you eat, exercise, the things you learn. The brain is very adaptable. It's very flexible. Obviously, what I'm talking about today, a lot of it hasn't been researched specifically with an FASD brain. But regardless, again, of what the person's diagnosis is, I think the more we can put good things into our mind, good things into our body, being around healthy, positive people, it's going to make a difference. Yes, people with FASD have brain injuries from prenatal alcohol exposure, but there's always things we can do to make it better, regardless of how old the person is. Of course, obviously, early intervention is key. The earlier we can implement these things in early life is going to be important. But if you're an adult listening to this, the more you can start doing these things, I think it can make a huge difference. And it's a really fascinating topic in the world of neuroscience.
So, give me an example. You say the earlier we start doing these things, what kinds of things can we do?
Reading, learning,
Mhm.
playing chess,
Mm,
traveling, laughing, eating healthy, exercise. I mean, all the things you and I have talked about in a lot of our other podcast
episodes.
appearances.
Yeah.
But again, neuroplasticity is so, so important when we talk about like development and learning and memory. There's a lot of neuroplasticity literature that's talked about in the brain injury literature. So if you've studied traumatic brain injury, you're going to find a lot of good stuff in there. Again, I wish there was more in the FASD world. There's some, but we definitely need more. And there's many different terms you can find under this umbrella of neuroplasticity. I don't know if we'll have the time to get into all of them today. But again, at the very basic core level, think of neuroplasticity as our brain's ability to maybe recover from something. So in neuro rehabilitation literature, they talk a lot about neuroplasticity, our ability to adapt and become more flexible over time. And again, this just has a lot to do with practice and doing it over and over and over again. We know folks with FASD, most people have a co-occurring mental health condition.
Mhm.
If you take FASD out of the equation and just look at the psychiatric literature, you're going to find a wealth of research findings on neuroplasticity within the context of Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's and stroke patients, and again, recovering from a traumatic brain injury, even depression and anxiety in folks with schizophrenia. If any mental health providers are listening to this today, you would do quite well, I think, introducing neuroplasticity research into the good work you're already doing when you're working with clients
Mhm.
who have a mental health condition, clients with trauma histories, clients with substance use problems, and the list goes on. It only is going to enhance, I think, the work you currently do.
Mhm.
Now, the research, Patty, right now on FASD basically indicates obviously that prenatal alcohol exposure is a major threat to our brain's neuroplasticity abilities. Of course it is, because look at what prenatal alcohol exposure does to the entire brain and the entire body. But it's not just prenatal alcohol exposure we need to worry about. What happens if somebody's had a lot of illnesses through life or various kinds of injuries, or
Mhm.
they're dealing with a ton of chronic stress, or maybe they've been exposed to lots of abuse, or they're dealing with tons of depression, or even chronic pain. There's a ton of literature on chronic pain and how that can contribute to neuroplasticity issues. So there's a
And
lot of
all of
things that
those things are quite common with FASD.
absolutely,
Yeah,
without a doubt.
yeah.
We know stress is high. We know most folks with FASD have extensive childhood trauma histories and fractured attachment problems. Unfortunately, substance misuse. If you look at some of the older literature, 40 to 50% of people with FASD may have some substance use issues,
Mhm.
just depending on the study, of course. But all of those things can contribute to maladaptive neuroplasticity. So the more we can target those things on top of understanding FASD, I think we're going to be in a better position to help the brain work better. It's not going to cure it again, like you said, but we can do things to make it better.
So spell out for the audience who may or may not like digging into research, as you and I do, how is it that the alcohol exposure decreases the degree of neuroplasticity in a person?
Well, I think when you think about prenatal alcohol exposure, a couple things you'd want to be aware of is synaptic plasticity. So that would be a good term for your folks to be aware of. So synaptic plasticity, think of it as it's kind of the junctions in our brain between the neurons.
Mhm.
And those junctions might not work properly. So I'm on one side of the phone, you're across the country on the other side. That synaptic plasticity, the communication between us having a phone call, doesn't work properly.
Mhm.
And disordered synaptic plasticity has been studied within the context, I know, of brain-based problems, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, learning problems, to name a few.
Mhm.
Another big topic, and I wish we could spend a lot of time on these things, is something called neurogenesis. That's a really interesting topic for your audience to be aware of. So it's called neurogenesis.
Which is the growth of new nerve cells.
Basically,
No?
up within the nervous system. And the bulk of this research says it's more located in the hippocampus.
Mhm.
And if you know that part of the brain, the hippocampus has a lot to do with memory. Other things too. There's a lot of neurogenesis going on in our olfactory bulbs as well. So it's really, really interesting stuff. And if you look at the neurogenesis literature, what are the things that can adversely impact that? Well, as we get older, the very nature of the aging process can impact that.
Mhm.
Neuroinflammation. You and I have talked a lot about inflammation. So
Oh.
most people in this country probably are dealing with elevated levels of inflammation. I say that because of the food that a lot of people eat, sedentary behaviors, eating high fat foods, processed foods, sugary rich foods. Alcohol adversely impacts neurogenesis and just having addictive tendencies, to name a few. So those are definitely some things. And I suppose one other topic that relates to what you're asking, I would recommend folks at least understanding the basic terminology associated with brain-derived neurotropic factor. That's a really cool topic. Brain-derived neurotropic factor. It's a
Okay.
protein and it plays a critical role for growth cognitive functioning, neuroplasticity. It is involved in memory. It's involved in learning. It's involved in our mood, our sleep patterns, our appetite. Decreased levels of brain-derived neurotropic factor have been found to be associated with Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, Huntington's disease. The list goes on. Again, like everything we're talking about, think of all the negative things that can be happening to a person. What are the things that can make our brain-derived neurotropic factor levels go lower? Prenatal trauma, the research says, not just alcohol, drugs, but other kinds of adversities that happen in utero, tons of stress, even chronic social isolation. So if you know somebody that's isolated, doesn't have a lot of friends, they're very lonely, that's a factor. Poor sleep, air pollution, really interesting research around that. So somebody lives like near a factory or a busy freeway and they're exposed to lots and lots of air pollution, sedentary behaviors,
So,
lack of sunlight in the morning. And then here's one more thing just to think about, Patty. If this is a great question, like for an intake, if like there's a clinician listening to this, people that primarily live an indoor lifestyle where they're inside their house all the time, they don't get natural sunlight and they don't get fresh air. That's been also linked with lower levels of brain-derived neurotropic factor.
one of the
Want some
things that I
strategies
was,
how to support that?
yeah, I just, as an aside,
Yeah.
as you were saying that about the air pollution and being in a highly polluted area, when I flew to California and um, and my husband picked me up at the airport, it was back when we were trying to decide if we were going to live on the East Coast or the West Coast. And we're driving up the 405, which is the major beltway that goes around Los Angeles. And he said, "So what do you think? It's this big freeway that's like 10 lanes wide." And I looked around with horror on my face and said, "You can see your hair. You're not supposed to see hair." It was that awful. And then descending the mountain into the San Joaquin Valley was this brown cloud that we descended into. And it was like, oh, this is bad. This is very bad.
Not good. Just Google prenatal air pollution exposure and you might have some nightmares. It's not good. A lot of research on that coming out, but I get if the audience is wondering, okay, so we got all these things going on. What do we do to support brain-derived neurotropic factor? Again,
Exactly.
all the common sense things you can think of that are good for all of us. Getting good at physical activity. Yoga is excellent for this.
Mhm.
Maybe someone's saying, well, I can't exercise. I don't do yoga. I have joint problems, mobility issues. Meditation, just learning how to quiet the mind and sitting still. The act of meditation has been shown to be very helpful for this, including neuroplasticity.
Mhm.
Getting better sleep, getting natural sunlight, reducing your sugar intake, being around positive people. Again, you hear the common themes with interventions. Very, very important just to live a well-balanced lifestyle. I know that last episode we did, I think, was on lifestyle medicine. I'd encourage your audience to go back and listen to that. It gives a lot of practical tips on how we can just live a really healthy lifestyle through a lifestyle medicine lens.
Yeah, I will link that episode to this one when I put it up on YouTube. So to make it
Excellent.
easier for people. Yeah.
Excellent. I can give
Okay.
you a lot of interventions, whatever you would be helpful you think for your audience, Patty.
Yeah, those all, we do talk about a lot of these things, from all the different conversations we've had, and those are all very doable. So that's terrific. Those are all things that people can do without having a lot of financial resources, and that's important. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I think regardless of our situation where we're at, there's always things we can do
Hmm.
to make it better. There's always things we can do to implement in our life to maybe start moving in the direction of health.
Yeah.
Again, baby steps, even if it's something really, really small. Maybe it's reducing screen time. You're on your screen two
Hmm.
hours before bed. Maybe cut down 5 minutes a day until you're at a desirable level.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
you
In the
struggle with
wintertime, it's
thinking,
very easy for me to put the electronics away when the sun goes down. It's just automatic. It's kind of hard living in North Dakota when the sun doesn't go down till 11.
"Yeah, it's it's true. We are close neighbors.
It's a weird, weird thing.
I get you all the way. I know.
Did I move to the North Pole?
You're getting closer.
It's messing with my sleep cycle. Doggone it. Okay,
Seasonal
so
changes are no doubt, yeah, they're no joke either because of the circadian rhythm
yeah, yeah.
potential misalignment too to be aware of.
Well, it's I found the answer for me is a sleep mask.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Find what
So
works for you.
what the brain derived neurotropic factor. Um, so that is a protein you said or an
Yeah.
enzyme? It's a
Yeah.
protein.
It's protein in the brain and stuff, and it's
And
critical for
and
growth and development and
it
all
is
kinds of
like
stuff.
the thing involved in neuroplasticity.
No, no, there's being aware of neurogenesis as well
Okay.
and synaptic plasticity and there's all kinds of other things. There's big words out there, but just there's terms about the formation in your blood cells, there's glial cells in the brain. I mean, that's heavy duty neuroscience stuff, but
Mhm.
just know there's a lot of molecular mechanisms involved and that contribute to neuroplasticity. But again, the more we can infuse health and wellness into our
Mhm.
life, it's good for our brains, it's
Yeah.
good for our body, regardless if somebody has FASD or not.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. All right. What else are you finding? Tell me about just for those of us for those who were really curious, like I am, who may not follow up on all these other wonderful things to go down the Google bunny trails. Can you summarize for us the prenatal air pollution exposure?
Well, prenatal air pollution exposure has been shown to increase inflammation. It could lead to problematic birth outcomes. There's studies that show that it may increase the risk of certain kinds of disorders, ADHD. There's some research on autism going on. But again, any of these disorders, you can't look at one variable. It's
Yeah,
multifactorial.
yeah, yeah.
Then again, what is the person doing then? Let's say, okay, since we're talking about neuroplasticity today and air pollution is a variable that could be a threat to that.
Hmm.
What are some things we can do to combat that? Well, there's some really cool research on just the very nature of going for a walk
Mm,
has been shown to play a role in enhancing neuroplasticity. But the catch is too, if someone's going out for a walk in the smog, that's
I was going
probably
to
going to
ask
defeat the
that.
purpose.
Yeah. So
There's
that
some
would be
really
find an indoor climate to do the walk, like walking laps around a shopping mall, an indoor shopping mall, or if the local YMCA or recreation center might have an
yeah,
indoor walking track.
absolutely. Or just there is some research too on just spending time in nature.
Hmm.
So if you're close to nature, a park or a state forest, there's some really good research that shows the very nature of you getting out in nature more
Yeah.
reduces stress and it may actually enhance neuroplasticity.
Hmm.
In the general developmental disability literature, too, there's some studies that talk about the use of digital interventions to help promote neuroplasticity among folks with an intellectual developmental disability. And I think this can be applied to any neurodevelopmental disorder, but if you're working with a therapist and they're doing cognitive training or neurofeedback or social cognitive training, the very nature of doing those kind of things, going to therapy, being around somebody that you really, really trust and you're getting healthy interventions,
Mhm.
that's great for neuroplasticity. The more you can teach that individual how to have positive problem solving skills, or maybe you engage with your loved one or client and you help them take up a new hobby or get them interested in learning something new or engage in some mentally stimulating kind of task. Those are all great for neuroplasticity.
Mhm.
Journaling, too, another practical strategy, might not be great for everybody, but some people love journaling. The act of journaling,
And people
self-reflection.
can draw as a form of journaling
Period.
also.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah,
Those kind of things.
yeah.
So there's a lot of things we can do. And I guess another thing to think about, what can you do practically in yourself, your loved one, your client? There's something called self-directed neuroplasticity. And basically, it's kind of what it sounds. If we can teach that client how to engage in more self-directed behaviors, such as engaging in health and wellness, deliberate awareness, having better self-reflection, engaging in more positive, healthy habits, positive thinking, those are things that can enhance neuroplasticity. So the more you can teach that client more metacognitive skills, enhance their
Mhm.
executive function, maybe you enhance their self-control skills, and you can teach that client or the loved one or even in yourself, when things are tough, when I'm stressed out, when I want to reach for that piece of cake at 2 in the morning when I wake up, let's kick in the self-reflection. Will that help me in the long run? Is it better for me to lay around all day, or is it better for me to get up and maybe move around, have a glass of water, get some sunlight? Is it better for me to smoke cigarettes or maybe consider quitting?
Yeah,
Is it better for me to pick up that sugar sweetened beverage, or is it better for me to maybe pick up a glass of water?
yeah.
The more we can teach those skills in helping people seek out more clarity,
Mhm.
more intention, more purpose, and even helping them have better controlled attention. So you're talking to someone and they're drifting off, they're only catching every other word. These are all self-directed kinds of things we can do to help enhance neuroplasticity as well.
Yeah, yeah. So neuroplasticity, one of the things one of the reasons it's so important is that is the basis by which all the interventions that we put into place in helping ourselves come up with the workarounds or helping our family member, whether it be a spouse or a child, or an employee even. Um, Neuroplasticity is the vehicle by which those become effective tools, right?
I think it's a big,
That
big
once they
component.
get
Yeah,
internalized.
it's not going to be the only thing, but the more you can do that repetitiously over and over and over again
Mhm.
and enhance neuroplasticity in the general research literature, not FASD specific, says it may help enhance memory.
Mhm.
Your problem solving skills get better. You're usually better at learning. Your creativity goes up. Your decision making's improved. And it can play a role in everyday life by enhancing your adaptive functioning skills. Folks with FASD struggle with all of those things.
Mhm.
So, in theory, if we can do these things with clients, loved ones who have suspected or confirmed FASD, it's tough to know, will it make all of those things better? I
Mhm.
don't know the answer to that because every brain is different, but
Mhm.
I'd like to think it can definitely make a difference. So,
Okay.
as you, I've thrown a lot of strategies out here at all of you, but as you kind of pull this together, and if you were to have a couple takeaways, the more that you can help your loved one or client or yourself get more physical activity, reduce sedentary behavior,
Yeah.
get better sleep, manage stress more effectively. We all deal with stress. How do we handle it? There's a case I consulted on recently. The individual has FASD, profound stress levels.
Hmm.
When she gets really, really stressed, she yells, screams, engages in self-injurious behavior. Learning stress management strategies can calm all that down. The
Yeah.
better we can eat, and you and I have talked a lot about nutrition, the more I think anybody, especially folks with FASD, would do quite well working with a registered dietitian, a licensed nutritionist, because what we put into our body
Makes a
has a lot
difference.
to do with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And changing our thinking too. If we wake up every day negative, if we think everything is bad, if we always think the future is going to be terrible,
Hmm.
that is eroding our neuroplasticity. So the more you can infuse gratitude,
Hmm.
optimism, resilience, hope, positive thinking, the research shows even if you don't feel that way and you fake it till you make it,
Yeah.
it can start enhancing and you might start shifting your brain into more positive thinking behaviors.
My rabbi used to always encourage people who struggle with depression, perhaps, rather than turn to medication, um, turning to gratitude. And he had what he called back then an what was it, an atomic timer. It looked like a pager, but he set it to go off every 10 minutes. And just in the, and he was a teacher in a university. I mean, he did all kinds of things, and so he did this around the clock, during waking hours, um, and just in the time it takes to reach your hand down to silence it for the next 10 minutes, you can identify something that you're thankful for, and in your mind, give thanks. And of course, he was thanking God because he was a rabbi, but
Yes, of course.
um, that attitude of gratitude, even if it's not an enthusiastic, oh, I'm so thankful, yet just the act of simply verbalizing and the acknowledgement of that good thing, he always said made a huge difference and could reduce the need for antidepressants and things like that. Now, being in the mental health, coming from a mental health background, I was never fully on board with yeah, you can get away with not taking drugs. Best to work with a professional.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, so I'll throw that caveat out even before you could, Jerrod.
Thank you. You knew I was going to say that.
Right?
But yeah, the
But
research on that is very, very promising. I try to
yeah,
practice it. It helps. It
yeah, it
absolutely
does.
helps.
It does.
It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to cure things. But
No,
again, just think about how you feel. Have you ever been around someone who's negative and moody all the time? How does that make you feel?
yeah,
Or when you're around people who are joyful and appreciative and thankful, how does that make you feel? I mean, just think about that. I mean, and the more you can infuse that into yourself, then you're radiating that energy to other people too.
yeah. Yeah, it makes the difference between is your glass half full or half empty? The more we
Absolutely.
acknowledge what we have, the less we focus on what we don't. And
We all have barriers, we all have challenges, but we all have strengths. We
yeah.
all have resources, we all have talents. We got to capitalize on those things too.
Well, Jerrod, I know your time was limited today, so I want to thank you for this wonderful, wonderful episode with so many practical tips and tricks, things that we can all begin implementing right away. I'm very grateful for all that. Do you have any thoughts on what you want to talk about next time?
I know we talked a little bit about the topic of anosognosia, that maybe we were going to
That's a
focus
good
on
one.
that.
That's a
And we
good
also
one.
just briefly talked about, and this is coming up a lot for me, but really talking about too how and why some folks with FASD may be at greater risk of experiencing domestic family violence and really digging into that research and what can we do about that? Domestic
Oh,
violence is alive and well in our country, regardless of who the person is.
yeah.
But a lot of times, folks with FASD may be more vulnerable to some of those things. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think those were a couple ones coming up that we were
Okay.
talking about.
All right. So for those of you in the audience, I would invite you to email me at livingwithfasdpodcast@gmail.com and give us your questions. And the next time Jerrod comes on, we'll see if we can answer them. All right. And also, if you would, let me know which one of these tools, these tips and tricks that we've talked about today has been making a difference in your life. So we would love to hear that from you. All right, Jerrod, my friend, thank you so much.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you, everyone.
I'll see you next time.